I missed a pretty big decision, which probably had a big impact.
And here she is in the middle again.
And I received a lot of abuse.
Experienced referee to enjoy this occasion.
Hatred, I was spat off the park. And I think at that point, I think you do question, is it worth it?
Today on Stronger Than You Think, we welcome one of the most well-respected referees in the game of rugby, Hollie Davidson. Now, she started her rugby career as a player, but due to an unfortunate injury, she had to find a new way to embrace the game that we all love. Well, it didn't take long before Hollie eventually became Scotland's first full-time female professional referee. That was back in 2017. Since then, she's been the ultimate trailblazer when it comes to officiating the sport, managing some of the biggest games on the world stage. These include the Rugby World Cup Sevens final, the Rugby World Cup 15s final, the Commonwealth Games final, Six Nations, and most recently at the WXV. You've been around the block, Hollie, and we are so pleased that you've stopped off here at Stronger Than You Think. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Refereeing is one of the most difficult jobs. How challenging is it for you?
Yeah, it is challenging. Finding the balance between probably who you listen to and who you don't listen to will always be one of the main struggles in the job. But I think when you have a great support around you, it can also be one of the best jobs out there in rugby especially.
In terms of like your support circle, how would you say your friends describe you?
Busy.
Do they see you?
Yeah, exactly. They know when I go away that I pretty much, you don't hear from me for that duration. But yeah, they'd say hardworking, very driven, cheeky and sarcastic probably.
Oh, I love that.
Nice balance, that.
Yeah. But yeah, they're the people that keep you grounded. They're the people that allow you to do what you do, but very much bring you back down to earth when you come home. Yeah.
Considering you have got one of the hardest jobs, you are still smiling. You are literally a breath of fresh air, super easy, to chat to. Do you feel like you don't let what happens on the pitch affect your personal life too much?
I think it's a bit of both. When I started out in my career, I very much took what happened on field away with me. Yeah. And I didn't know how to cope with it. When I was announced at being the first Scottish female professional referee, it was all very positive in the media and I was like, oh, this is fantastic. But then my first 15s international, I gave a red card for a leading forearm and that positivity soon turned into huge negativity. And as the time went on, I ended up going down rabbit holes on social media platforms and seeing all the negative comments, and I would take that energy with me for the next 2-3 days at home, which wasn't good. Whereas now my social media is pretty much completely locked down as to who can contact me and who can, and there will always be the people that get through the cracks. But I try now to say that it's work, and my identity and who I am as a person isn't dictated fully on my job.
I mean, I suppose it's quite easy as well, like especially social media. If stuff's popping up and that, it's easy just to have a quick look and then you just start scrolling and see it all. So like if you were doing a tournament, would you just shut it off or would you kind of still get into that now?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because I could sit and say, no, I don't look at it at all.
Yeah.
But it's probably what I've learned is actually not to put as much weighting on when I do read the comments. So I still see them. And before, if I'd seen negative comments or abuse, I would cling on to them. I would remember them and wear them really, really heavily. Whereas now I try and put less weighting on the actual comments. And yeah, I read it. Sometimes they're funny, but I try and brush them off and move on from them relatively quickly.
It's good that you have your own way of dealing with it, and it's kind of that self-preservation, isn't it? You just kind of put it to one side. You know that everyone is going to have an opinion about everything that you do, especially when you're in the centre, when you're controlling a game, and there's a rivalry there automatically. There's always going to be some fans that agree with your decision, and there's always going to be the other half that are never going to agree, right? Yeah. So you can never please everyone, and I think, like you say, once you get to grips with that, and you know it's just your job, and that, you know, it comes with it sometimes, which, you know, it's just one of those things,
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's go back to when you first started in the game. You started as a player, didn't you? You know,
Yes.
How did it all begin, your rugby journey?
So I'm from a little school called Aboyne up north in Scotland, and we used to go to the Six Nations games as a school. So the school would get children's tickets and we would head down, and it was just unbelievable. Like, I'd never experienced a sport like it. I'd never been to a stadium like Murrayfield. So travelling down to a sport that seemed so inclusive, and when I was sat watching, there were so many different shapes and sizes out in the field that I looked and said, well, why do we not make a team at home? So we ended up forming a academy team, a school team at home, and it kind of just went from there. We were lucky that a lot of the girls that played came from quite like an athletic background, so whether that was we ran for the school, we played basketball, badminton, whatever it was, all of those people came together and we just had the best time. And so from there I went through the age grade stuff in Scotland, and then moved down to Edinburgh to go to university, and then that's again when it probably really kicked on.
You were actually pretty good at rugby, weren't you? You were pretty close to getting a cap for Scotland. How did your rugby career develop? And when did you know, oh, you know, I've got real talent?
So when I went to university, I started playing again because I'd probably not played for a couple of years in my 5th and 6th year. I wasn't the most academic, so I needed to study to make sure that I got to university. So the sport kind of took a back seat. Then I went to university and picked it back up, where Claire Cruikshank was my coach there, and she'd seen me during age grade pathway stuff. So she actually was our rival coach when we were involved in the pathway. And she said, it's great to see you back. Are you keen to play rugby again? I said yes. So went down to the taster session, and from there was involved in university rugby for the next 4 years. Ended up captaining in my 2nd year of uni, which I was a 19, 20-year-old, like, junior rookie, but it was fantastic. And then started playing at Murrayfield Wanderers, who is like our Sunday League championship side. And it was just from there, I think when you just get so sucked into rugby, you want to do everything, you want to commit to everything. So played under 20s, and then from 20s got pulled up to the senior setup. And we went to a training camp during summer, and it was one of the most brutal things I've ever done. I questioned, I was like, am I cut out for this? I'm not sure. But yeah, and then I was named on the bench to get my first start at 19. And we used to do training games, and a dislocated shoulder later, I was pulled 5 days from travel. And then I just never made it back in.
Before the dislocated shoulder, when you were selected, how did you feel? How excited were you in that moment?
I was, like, words can't explain, I think, when you get that call to say that you're making your international debut, when you're going to get that cap. I honestly couldn't believe it. I was kind of in shock. I knew it was on the horizon, but I never thought it would come quite as quick as it did. And then probably everything had gone out to media, and then for that to be taken away was so, like, it was destroying. Like, it's one emotional, there was so many emotions floating around. There was like ecstasy to be selected, and then the real dark lows of being so close to something and then it not coming to fruition was, yeah, really tough to handle.
So, like, once you did your shoulder, what sort of happened from there? Because that's like a lot to deal with, and then just how you've sort of then gone into refereeing, that's like quite a big transition, because you're still involved in rugby as well. you know?
Yep, so the next kind of couple of years, the shoulder was always just giving me issues.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't for my last year of university, I ended up finally getting surgery on my shoulder. So had a reconstruction on the shoulder. And at that point, I'd just been playing like uni rugby and club rugby, but just always coming off, like always just like having this niggle. So after surgery, I was like, okay, here we go. And it just never happened. And I remember previously when I've spoken, I probably questioned how dedicated I truly was to getting back in. I think maybe as a youngster, I thought I was giving it my all. I think looking back now, I wasn't. I probably liked the idea of, yeah, I'll go training and yes, I want the cap, but if I reflect truly, I don't think I was dedicated enough to have that honour of being cap for my country. And I think then when I moved into reffing, I said I wanted to give it my all. I wanted to be the best I could. I wanted to strive to places that other people had never been before. And hopefully we're still on that journey. We're not finished yet, but that's probably where that drive inside me comes to give it my all now in the position I'm in.
When you dislocated your shoulder, was that playing the game?
Yep.
And that was how long before you were meant to be playing your first cap?
5 days.
5 days.
It's funny because you say you question your dedication to the sport. It feels like it was probably ripped away from you and you were meant to have that first cap, and maybe that's your way of dealing with it and processing it, and your journey has gone on a different path into refereeing, and obviously you're doing amazing things in the officiating world, real trailblazer for women who want to get involved and so well respected. So when was the point where, you know, you've gone through all the turmoil of not getting your first cap, where you thought, oh, there are other ways to be involved with the game that I absolutely love?
I think when people talk about refereeing and recruitment of refereeing, it's probably totally different than a player. As a player, you watch someone and you're like, that's class what they've just done, or did you see them score that try, or did you see that huge hit? To recruit referees, they're probably like, did you see how bad that referee was? Did you see that really bad decision? And I probably was one of those people that used to get stuck into refs all the time. Like, I couldn't understand how they would be missing so much, or just why they weren't keeping up with play. And so when I knew that my playing career was coming to an end, I'd probably always been a bit of a nose when it came to the laws of the game, trying to always one-up my opposition, or because I was a bit mouthy, always try and chat back to the referee to say, oh, well, I know more than you. So I kind of looked myself in the mirror and said, if I'm going to do that, then I kind of need to put my money where my mouth is. And at the time, we see it now, yes, there's more exposure in female refs, but you look at the Six Nations, Joy Neville's obviously in the box, but we don't see her on field. We now see female refs in URC, in the Premiership, which is great. But the more exposure we can see, then the better. Because as a youngster, when I was coming through, you'd maybe see the odd female ref in the Women's Six Nations, but that was it. So to actually say, this is what I want to do, when no one else really was on the scene, was scary. But I probably still had that belief from when I was a player that I carried into my reffing to say, well, I can put my hat in the ring and see where we go.
And how long did it take to become a referee? You know, the qualification side of things, how did you balance that with what you were doing at the time? Was it a full-time thing?
Yeah, so you start doing your qualifications and they go on across weekends. So across the summer, I'd pretty much done the things that I needed to be able to do to start going out to reffing. But they're all fine and well. Being in the classroom is the safe space. I remember the first game I went out and refereed was like an under-16s. And I was so nervous because you eventually get to a point that you constantly are getting in the way that you just referee from the sidelines. Like little children are running around you and shouting at you because you're getting in the way of what they want to do. So it was probably that summer in in 2016, did my qualifications properly, and then it's literally just about getting out and running around and making mistakes and just trying to enjoy it as much as possible.
You know what? That's the thing that I would not even think about. It's more the rules, making sure the decisions are right, but actually it's just standing in the right place.
Yeah, that's what would terrify me. I was like, what if I get smashed or something like that, or if you get in the wrong way? Yeah, that's what would go in my mind anyway.
Yeah, because you have to kind of be there without being involved at all, without people noticing you, but you have to see everything. So actually you're a smooth operator, really.
And even the warm-ups as well, like you've got to be fit as well to be a referee. I don't think people probably realise that, like to keep up with the game and stuff.
Yeah, people always ask, like, what does your week look like?
Yeah.
And I think people probably expect us to just turn up and referee the 80 minutes on the Saturday or Sunday. But yeah, there's a lot of physical prep that goes in, especially the more games that you do and the higher levels you go up to, the faster it becomes, and the more robust your body has to be.
What did your friends and like family think of like the career change? Because obviously they've seen you like being a player and then to go into this new like journey. What did they think?
The people that knew me probably weren't surprised. No.
You found your calling.
Yeah. They weren't surprised at all. People that maybe had come across me or were like acquaintances, they still think that it's insane that this is my job, and just how cool it is. But yeah, I think when I initially said that I was giving up my full-time finance job to become a referee, there was some apprehension because you never know if it's going to go well. It's unpredictable. If you have one really bad game, that could be your career over. Whereas in a 9-to-5 job, you have that security. But I never wanted to turn around when I got to 40 and still be sat at a desk job thinking, what if? What if I just had taken that leap to say, why not? Like, give it a go. If it doesn't work, I can always go back to something that I feel comfortable and safe in. So that's probably where we ended up here.
So you've refereed some of like the biggest games on the world stage, but what's been like your favourite game and why, basically?
Favourite game?
I mean, there's been a few. So it must be quite hard to narrow it down to one.
Yeah, there's probably two. When I got onto the sevens, the first year I was literally just thinking, this is unbelievable, and riding that enjoyment wave. And then the second year, I started putting myself into contention for knockout fixtures. So for myself, being quite competitive, I always wanted to be in and around knockout fixtures. So whether that's into quarterfinals, semis, finals, or the bronze. And in my second year, I kept getting the bronze medal games. So they called me like the most capped bronze final referee because I just couldn't crack getting. I could not get it. And then we were in Glendale, USA Sevens, and did the quarterfinal. And then I thought, oh well, as per, I'll do a quarter and then I'll do the bronze. So I was in the changing room, feet up, and they come in and they tell you the appointments for the next rounds. And I was on the semi-final. And I was just so taken aback because I hadn't refereed any differently than I had done in previous comps. So that was a bit, surprising. So did the semi-final, and then I was on an absolute high thinking, fantastic, done the semi-final. And then they come in again and they say, okay, Hollie, you're on the final as well. And I was thinking, okay, now I'm exhausted. I'd done the semi, I'd done quarter, semi, and then I was doing the final on that day. And to be able to go out there and just enjoy a game like that, not having any expectation to get the final, was so enjoyable. Great group of girls that were out during that competition. It was USA were in the final against New Zealand, so the home team, and it was just such a nice occasion, and that was my first feeling of a final ever. And after that, I was like, I like this feeling, and it probably still made me like drive to move on. And then obviously probably the World Cup final last year. Walking out to Eden Park was. Amy Barrett Theron was one of my ARs, and we just looked at one another and literally like smiled as we walked out the tunnel to think, this is unbelievable what we're doing, and to see where women's rugby was at that time and where it's going to go, like, it honestly gave me absolute goosebumps. And I think in other fixtures that have that magnitude, I was always so worried about the outcome, like, am I going to put in a good performance? And I honestly just went out and thought, Hollie, like, this is what you've been working towards. Enjoy it. It's going to be tough. I knew that there's going to be people that were upset, disappointed, and on the flip of that, absolute elation. But I just tried to keep, we spoke about my bubble and keeping me in my bubble and try and enjoy it as much as possible. And yeah, it was like no words at all.
I've got goosebumps.
That sounds unreal.
Yeah, and having that moment where it's huge for women's rugby, women's sport, and for yourself. You know, you have carved this amazing career in officiating, and then you get that Rugby World Cup final, a huge moment for women. But that was a tough game, wasn't it? There were some big calls made in that, and, you know, obviously England didn't win.
Yeah.
How difficult was that for you? Do you find it difficult to make those decisions? Obviously, I know it's just a job, but you know what it means to people, and whether it's England or whether it's anyone else, you know, you throw up a red card, you have to have real conviction in those decisions.
Absolutely. I don't think in any of these games, no official wants to ever give a red card. And you could feel the kind of air being sucked out of it a little bit when when I showed the red card. And I think it's probably easier to reflect post-game, because I still had, I think the red card was about 20 minutes. I still had another 60 minutes of my job to do. And obviously at that time, England were up 14, 17 points maybe, I think, against New Zealand. And then there was a huge shift. So yeah, big decisions. And I think afterwards it's hurtful. I saw an interview recently, obviously, with Lydia, and it absolutely broke my heart to just hear her struggles with it as well. So yeah, it's probably, I can't imagine what she's kind of gone through at all.
But it's not personal.
No.
It is just the game.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we have to keep reminding ourselves. You know, you are just doing your job. And I think that's what everyone needs to remember. It's that the referees, you know, without you guys, we wouldn't have a game. Mm-hmm. You have to make those difficult decisions, and you have to make the right decisions, and that's what you did.
Yeah.
But you also, as an officiating team, look back at every game, don't you, and you analyse what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go through a performance review process where every decision that we did make gets, if it was a correct decision or if it was an error, and then we get marked on non-decisions, so when we should have blown our whistle. And then sort of game management stuff as well. So yeah, it's a comprehensive review. It's brutal. But for me, it's the only way that the game grows. Yeah. We get better. We as a collective get better.
Has there ever been a moment in your career, Hollie, where you've had a comment made or you've seen something online and you've thought, you've questioned your decision to get into refereeing?
Yeah. I think when you go, certain games are going to be harder than others. And I think it was maybe 2 years ago I'd done the France-England Six Nations Women's Final. And I hadn't had my best game. And for whatever reason, I prepped the same. I felt like I was working hard around the park, but just things were not clicking. I missed a pretty big decision, which probably had a big impact on two big decisions, probably against the French, which probably had an impact on the outcome. And I received a lot of abuse, hatred. I was spat off the park. There was stuff being chucked at us. We were security escorted off and then back to the hotel. And I think at that point, I think you do question your involvement in things. You question, is it worth it? I reflected, and I can easily say that yes, I made mistakes in the game, but I don't think I had ever expected that as a result of a game of rugby. Whereas now I probably just have more awareness of the challenges that certain games face. And I've accepted that it's not just those 80 minutes. It's the 80 minutes, it's the warm-up, so it's arriving at the ground, and certain people in certain places don't like me as a referee, and that's fine, I accept that. But it's knowing that's going to be the environment that I go into. So pre-80 minutes and very much post the game, I've changed my thinking to say these are the things that I have to accept. They're not going to be nice, they're not easy. But it does, and it did make me question, how much longer can I do this for? I think it worries my family, definitely. Like, my mum will see stuff and she'll get in contact, and I know that she's probably just checking in to see if I'm okay, but it probably affects her more than it does affect me. So yeah, you do question things. And then sometimes I look at the bigger picture and say, well, I'm doing it for when we're down at WXV, at each location, I was stopped by young girls that have taken up refereeing, asking for photos, asking to sign in. You can't say that happens with referees that often, but I was like, that's why we're doing this. That's why we accept the criticism. That's why we put ourselves out there week after week, because we want more girls involved in our game. We want more girls involved in refereeing, and the more that happens, the more I've done my job.
That's so nice that you're getting that attention from the younger generation, and they're seeing this as something that they want to get involved with, because we, like you say, we want more women to be refereeing. We want more people to be involved with the game. And you speaking there about coming to a game, you're a real tough cookie, because I feel like that takes real strength to be like, hey, some people here don't like me. They've already got a preconceived idea of the person that I am, because they're judging you on what you've done previously. But just to put that to the back of your mind and be like, you know what, I'm doing my job, I know I'm good at it, and I actually really enjoy being here. So if if some people aren't so happy about it, then it's not your problem really, is it? It's more their problem.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice to have that outlook.
Yeah, and I think for me, if the game has gone okay, it's easy for me to have that outlook.
Yeah.
If the game has been a bit tougher, I have to force myself to try and remember that, to challenge myself to say, Hollie, remember what we almost like thought about pre-game, to put some perspective in it, to say it's a game. We should be enjoying it. And I think sometimes in our sport, there's not that enjoyment there anymore at all, even at grassroots level. So I think it's great if we get back to why we play the game and get back to like our values of the game. I think it would be better moving forward.
Has there been a moment, obviously, in your career where you've kind of surprised yourself, where you've maybe overcome something that you didn't think you would, especially during this very high pressure environment? Like,
yeah, I think as my career's gone on, I probably have been able to deal with things better, and because I have the support there. But one of the biggest challenges was probably actually when I first started, and because I'd been in a team environment where everything was, okay, Hollie, you need to be here at this time and the bus will take you here, and then everything is sorted. As a referee, as a junior ref, you're going to clubs on your own, you're going to places that you don't know, you're getting, just everything is the unknown. And I remember when I moved up into men's rugby, the anxiety and nerves around arriving at a game on my Todd, not knowing anybody, people thinking that you're potentially the physio and you get put in the like literally the broom cupboard because there might be another referee there. It's actually overcoming those things to know then what you're getting yourself into, and to then say, okay, this is easy now. Instead, you don't always have to have the nice shiny changing rooms, and they come, sure, but to actually be able to get over the challenges of like having the nervousness of entering this completely unknown environment when you're really one that stands out. Actually, that first step was the hardest, and once you do that first step, everything else seems like a breeze.
All comes with experience, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Makes you stronger, definitely. What has refereeing taught you about yourself?
Yeah, it very much makes you a resilient person, and I'm probably quite reflective. I think it encourages you to hold the people closest to you even closer, because they're the ones that are always in your corner. When it feels like there's nobody there, they're the ones that are there to like pull you through anything. So it probably has made me grow a very thick skin, but also be able to identify what I hold dear in my life. And that probably is the main takeaways.
So what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about getting into refereeing?
It probably goes back to the point I just made in taking that first step. It can give you such great experiences, and you can meet the best people, and you can have so much fun. So I would just say, get out there, enjoy it, take the first step. It doesn't matter if you referee from the sidelines, but just give something back. I'd like to think the more humanised referees become, the more people are like, oh yeah, I could actually give that a go, I could give that a crack, and give something back to your minis, your juniors, your guys, your women's teams on Saturdays and Sundays.
When it comes to your career, Hollie, what's your ultimate dream? What's the ultimate goal? Where do you want to be?
I would love to be at the Men's World Cup in 4 years' time, down in Australia. Yeah. And how we get there over the next 4 years, hopefully involvement in some capacity in Men's Six Nations, summer tests that are challenging, do the Women's World Cup in 25, which hopefully then sets me up to go down to Australia in 27.
Well, we're all manifesting it for you now.
Yeah.
We've put it out into the universe, so watch this space. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Hollie.
Thank you.
It's been so interesting speaking to you, and we're wishing you all the very best with whatever comes next. Hello, you've been watching Stronger Than You Think with me, Ashleigh Wilmot.
And me, Jodie Ounsley, so give us a like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.